She let a homeless man sleep in her garage for one night, unaware he was a millionaire. And snowflakes swirled like torn paper as Andrea tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her breath fogged the windshield as she peered through the snow, searching for the house she had only seen online. The headlights revealed a rusted garage door framed by snowbanks. She exhaled. "This is it," she whispered. "Home, or something like it. Home, but..." She killed the engine and sat still, fingers trembling above the keys. Boston was behind her now, 6 years, a ring never given, and a betrayal she still could not believe. "I just want to disappear," she thought. "At least no one here knows I was stupid enough to trust him, to trust her." Blinking back tears, she grabbed her bag and stepped into the cold. Her boots crunched on frozen ground as the wind slapped her face and tossed her blonde hair. She fumbled with the keys, her heart pounding, not from excitement but from exhaustion. She remembered his last words as if they still hung in the air. "I'm sorry, Andrea. It just happened. We didn't mean to hurt you." She had not replied. She had walked away. Now she turned the key and stepped into her rental. Dim lights, bare walls, dusty floors. Everything felt paused, untouched by time. She set her bag down, fingers trailing along the back of a worn couch. Then she crossed the room and pulled aside the curtain. Outside, the garage stood still in the snow, cold and silent. A sound, a soft metallic scrape. Andrea's body tensed. She froze, eyes narrowing toward the garage. Was it the wind? Another scrape, louder this time, like metal against cement. Her heart jumped into her throat. She quickly grabbed the baseball bat left near the entryway, a relic from her childhood, and stepped back out into the cold. Snow hit her face in harsh slaps as she crept toward the garage. The door was slightly ajar, a gap wide enough for someone to slip through. Her grip tightened around the bat. "Who's there?" she called out, voice trembling but firm. "I have a weapon. I will use it." Silence. Then a shape moved inside, slowly, cautiously. A man stepped into view, hunched over, wrapped in layers of torn clothing. His beard was thick, frost clinging to the ends. He raised his hands, palms out. "I just needed to get out of the cold," he said hoarsely. "Just one night." Andrea stared at him, heart pounding. Everything in her told her to run, to shut the door, to call the police. But she hesitated. There was something in his voice, in the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of invisible burdens. His eyes, gray-new and sunken, met hers. They were tired, not dangerous, just tired. She exhaled sharply, lowering the bat just slightly. "Just one night," she repeated. "No noise, no mess." He nodded quickly. She opened the garage door wider, stepping aside. "There's an old blanket in there. I'll bring it." He hesitated at the threshold, like a man who had been turned away too many times, then stepped inside. Andrea turned back to the house, returned minutes later with a blanket and an unopened bottle of water. She handed them to him without a word. "I won't cause trouble," he murmured. "You better not," she replied, not quite harshly. "Just one night." He nodded again and settled into the corner of the garage, wrapping himself in the blanket. She watched him for a second longer, then closed the door, locking it with a click that echoed louder than she expected. Inside her house again, she leaned against the door and closed her eyes. "What the hell are you doing?" she whispered to herself. But even as fear whispered doubts in her ear, something else stirred beneath it, a quiet, tentative flicker. A door opened not just in the garage, but in her guarded, aching heart. Andrea woke early, still wrapped in layers of sleep and the faint echo of last night's unease. The house was silent, the heater humming low. She walked barefoot to the kitchen, rubbed her eyes, and started the coffee machine. The aroma of dark roast soon filled the air, grounding her. Part of her expected the man to be gone. Maybe he had slipped away in the early morning without a trace, like some ghost carried off by the wind. But when she peeked through the frosted kitchen window toward the garage, she froze. The floor, once dusty and scattered with old boxes, was spotless. The blanket she had given him had been neatly folded and placed on a crate, folded in perfect square edges. Military precision. Her eyes lingered. It was the kind of fold her father, a retired Marine, used to do, not something you learn on the streets. She opened the back door and stepped out. A soft breeze of cold brushed her face, but what caught her attention wasn't the chill. It was the small ceramic mug sitting on the top step. Steam curled upward lazily from a warm cup of cocoa. No note, no explanation, just a silent gesture. She picked it up, brought it to her lips. Not too sweet, just the way she liked it. Andrea stared at the garage for a long moment, then walked over and knocked gently before opening the door. He was sitting on a folded tarp in the far corner, tying his boots. He looked up, surprised, then quickly stood, straightening his layers of patched-up clothing. "Morning," he said, voice softer than last night. "You cleaned," Andrea said, not as a question. "I thought it was the least I could do. You let me stay." She hesitated, eyes narrowing. "You made cocoa?" He nodded once. "I saw the mix in the pantry through the window. I hoped you wouldn't mind." There was a pause, a long one. Then she asked, "Do you need another night?" He looked down, exhaled. "If it's not too much trouble. Just a few days. I'll stay out of your way, I promise." Andrea's instinct wrestled with her better judgment for a beat. Then she nodded. "Okay, but no surprises, and no one else, just you." "I understand," he said, with something that might have been gratitude flickering in his eyes. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. She would wake, and somehow the sidewalk would already be cleared of snow. The second morning she heard the subtle clink of tools under the sink and walked in to find him fixing the leaky faucet. He stood up quickly, mumbling apologies, but she simply nodded and let him continue. She watched from the window as he helped Mrs. Whitmore, the grumpy old widow across the street, carry salt bags to her porch. Andrea nearly dropped her coffee when she saw Mrs. Whitmore actually smile. She had not smiled in years. The entire neighborhood had accepted her as a permanent fixture of gloom, and yet this stranger had somehow cracked that wall. They talked. Slowly, hesitantly at first. Over breakfast, she offered him toast and he declined, but stayed to talk. Over lunch, he commented on the books she left scattered around. One evening, they sat on the back porch, wrapped in their own thoughts and two separate blankets, watching the snow fall in silence. When she asked him about music, his eyes lit up. He spoke about jazz like someone who had lived through every note. When she mentioned her favorite painter, he quoted one of their interviews. When she mentioned the painter, he quoted one of their interviews. "You read that?" she asked, surprised. "Years ago," he said. "I used to love art. Still do, I suppose." Andrea began to look forward to their quiet conversations. There was something familiar in the way he spoke. Not just educated, but thoughtful, measured. She found herself wondering, more than once, who he had been before the layers of clothing and weariness. He never offered his name, and she never asked again. But his presence began to fill her space in ways that felt strangely comforting. He did not demand, he did not intrude, he simply was, and somehow that was enough. She realized one afternoon that she had smiled more in the past 3 days than she had in the past 3 months, and the oddest part, she did not feel guilty about it. Whatever he was running from, it was clear that he was a man of thought, of patience, and of quiet kindness. Andrea could not explain it. She did not try. But for the first time in a long time, she did not feel alone. The wind howled through the cracks in the old window frames as the town of Maple Hollow went dark. One by one, the houses on the street flickered out until nothing remained but the faint glow of snow under moonlight. Inside her little house, Andrea stood by the window, watching the trees sway violently, their bare branches like hands clawing at the night sky. The power had cut off 20 minutes ago, and silence had taken over everything. She pulled a blanket over her shoulders and made her way to the fireplace. After a few frustrating attempts, she managed to get the kindling lit, and the flames began to crackle, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The warmth slowly spread into the living room. There was a soft knock at the back door. Andrea opened it to find him standing there, hands buried in his coat pockets, his breath visible in the freezing air. "I saw your lights were out," he said. "Thought I could help, but it looks like you already figured it out." "Come in," she said after a moment's pause. "It's too cold out there." He hesitated, then stepped inside, careful to stamp the snow off his boots. She gestured toward the fire. "Sit, warm up." He nodded, removed his coat, and took a seat on the edge of the rug near the flames. Andrea sat opposite him. For a while they said nothing, letting the fire fill the silence with its gentle crackling. The shadows on his face shifted with the firelight, highlighting the creases near his eyes, the quiet weariness in his expression. She found herself studying him again. "Do you ever feel like life just picks you up and throws you somewhere you never planned to be?" Andrea asked quietly, not sure why she had spoken the words out loud. He looked at her for a moment, then said, "Every day?" She wrapped the blanket tighter around her. "I had a plan, a whole life mapped out. Wedding in the fall, kids in a few years, travel, a home filled with books and music. Then one day I walked in and saw him holding her, my best friend, like I never existed." She laughed bitterly, and just like that the plan vanished. I left the city, left everything. He was quiet, eyes on the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I used to have a life too, a name people recognized, applause, spotlights, cameras. I was someone, until I wasn't." Andrea's eyes widened slightly. "You were famous?" He gave a small shrug. "Maybe, maybe not. Depends who you ask. But the more they clapped, the more I lost myself. I looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the man staring back. So I walked away." She studied him. "You sound like an artist." His eyes flicked to hers, then away. He smiled faintly. "Something like that." She tilted her head. "What did you do? Paint? Music? Theater?" "Everything and nothing," he said. "I created things. Then I destroyed them." His voice carried the weight of something unspoken, and Andrea felt a strange pang in her chest. He spoke not like someone seeking pity, but someone confessing a truth he had carried too long. "What's your name?" she asked gently. He looked at her again, that same tired gaze meeting hers across the flickering light. "Just someone passing through." Andrea did not press further. She let the silence settle, heavy and intimate, like snow blanketing a quiet field. The fire popped, sending a tiny ember upward. "You know," she said finally, "I thought I'd come here to forget, but maybe I came here to remember who I was before him, before everything." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes the quiet places are where we hear ourselves again." They sat for a long time, two strangers bound by broken pasts, by choices they had not meant to make, and by the silent comfort of each other's presence. Neither of them spoke another word that night. They did not need to. The fire kept burning. The world outside was quiet, blanketed in fresh snow that fell through the early morning stillness. Andrea woke without reason, no alarm, no sound, just a strange, empty pull in her chest. She sat up slowly, blinking against the pale light slipping through the curtains. The room was colder than usual, and the silence different. She slipped on her sweater and stepped into her slippers, moving toward the back door. The floor creaked under her steps as she passed the kitchen. She glanced at the counter, no cocoa mug. Her hand paused on the doorknob. Something in her told her she already knew. The cold bit her face as she stepped outside. Snow crunched beneath her feet as she walked toward the garage. The door was slightly ajar, just like the night she first found him. She pulled it open fully, heart racing. Empty. The crate where he used to sit was bare. The old tarp he had folded into a mat was gone. No sign of boots, blankets, or warmth. The garage felt like a shell, hollow and lifeless. Andrea took a slow step inside, her breath visible in the icy air. Then she saw it. Resting gently on the crate was the scarf she had given him. Folded, clean, not tossed, not forgotten, left deliberately. And beside it, a piece of thick paper, weighted by a small rock. She picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a drawing. Rendered in soft graphite strokes, the image was unmistakably her, sitting at the window, curled in her chair, a book open in her hands. Light streamed in from the imagined glass behind her, casting her face in delicate shadows. There was peace in her expression, a calm that she had not known she wore. But he had seen it, captured it. Andrea pressed her hand over her mouth. Her knees weakened as she slowly sat on the crate. The drawing shook in her grip. She stared at it, and the longer she did, the more the tears came. Silent, hot tears that cut through the cold air and burned her cheeks. Saw me, she whispered. Her voice broke. He saw me. In a way I forgot I could be seen. The ache was sudden and overwhelming, flooding through her like a tide she could not stop. She was not crying because he left, though that hurt. She cried because in the short days he had been here, he had noticed her, really noticed her, in a way no one had in years. He had looked past her walls, past her pain, and seen the quiet dignity she thought she had lost. He had seen her not as a woman abandoned or broken, but as someone still whole. Andrea held the drawing to her chest and closed her eyes. "Why did you go?" she asked the empty space. The garage, silent and unmoved, offered no answer. Only the sound of snow falling softly outside, a hush that wrapped the world in stillness. She stayed there for a long time, hours, maybe. The drawing never left her hands. Days passed like snowflakes melting on warm skin, silent, slow, and leaving behind almost nothing. Andrea returned to her routines, morning coffee, brief walks, reading by the window. But the air in the house felt different now. Not empty, just missing something. Someone. She caught herself glancing toward the garage more often than she wanted to admit, hoping without reason that he might return, that she would find him there again, with his quiet presence and those deep, searching eyes. But it remained silent, still, hollow. The drawing stayed on her nightstand. She stared at it every night before bed, memorizing each line, each stroke of graphite that had somehow captured more than just her face. It had captured a version of herself she did not know she missed. One morning, after weeks of staring and wondering, she wrapped the drawing in brown paper and walked into town. Maple Hollow's art and framing shop was tucked between a bakery and a post office, its windows fogged from the heat inside. A bell chimed overhead as she stepped in, shaking the snow from her coat. Behind the counter stood an older man with silver-rimmed glasses, hunched slightly, but alert. He looked up and offered a polite smile. "Good morning. What can I help you with?" Andrea unwrapped the drawing carefully and laid it on the counter. The man leaned in. His smile faded. He reached for the edges of the paper, as if it were something sacred, and then said quietly, "Where did you get this?" Andrea hesitated. It was a gift. From someone who stayed with me for a short time. The man stared at the image, his eyes glistening. He touched the signature in the corner, simple, almost hidden, V. "Do you know who drew this?" he asked. Andrea shook her head. "He never told me his name." The man exhaled slowly and looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "This was done by Vincent Gray. I'd recognize that hand anywhere." She blinked. "Who is he?" The man's voice softened. "He was a rising star in the art world about 5, maybe 6 years ago. Young, brilliant, intense. His portraits, they didn't just show a face. They showed a soul. But one day he just vanished. No exhibitions, no press, nothing." He stepped out from behind the counter and walked to a small drawer. He returned with a photo, an old gallery poster. Vincent was there, in a sleek black suit, staring off to the side as if already halfway gone. The eyes were the same. Andrea's heart stumbled. "Mick came into this shop once," the man continued. "He had a leather bag and an old sketchbook. Asked if I had any pens or brushes for sale. Said he was on his way out of the city, done with it all." "What happened?" The man swallowed. "He cried, right here at this counter. Said he was done painting, that he had nothing left worth saying. Then he sold me his last fountain pen, the one he used for signatures. Said he never wanted to hold it again." Andrea clutched the edge of the counter. Why would someone like that just disappear? The man shook his head. "Some artists carry too much of the world inside them. It weighs them down." She left the shop in a daze, the framed drawing wrapped in new paper under her arm. Back at home, she searched online, every corner she could think of. Nothing. No social media, no recent exhibitions, no contact information. "I open your home," she shouted, and it was as if Vincent Gray had erased himself. And yet, he had been here, in her garage, in her home, in her life. It arrived on a Tuesday, slipped between the folds of junk mail and grocery store flyers, an envelope without a return address, soft cream in color, her name written in deep black ink across the front in a hand she knew instantly. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper. "If you still have the drawing, bring it. No date, no explanation, just that." Andrea stood frozen in the middle of her kitchen, her breath caught in her chest. She read it again, then again, as if the meaning might shift, but it did not. She set the letter down slowly and stared at it. For hours, it seemed, she sat there, watching the words blur and sharpen again under the dim kitchen light. Every line. By evening, the silence in the house grew unbearable. She paced the living room with the letter still in hand, her mind a whirlpool of questions and fears. Was it really him? Was this some kind of elaborate joke? What did he want from her? Her gaze drifted toward the framed drawing on the wall, the one he had left behind like a whisper. Every time she looked at it, her chest tightened. It was not just a picture. It was a memory, a moment. A part of her no one else had seen, except him. And now he was calling her back into his world, the world he had once fled from. Andrea sat on the edge of her bed that night, unable to sleep, unable to rest. The letter lay on her nightstand, taunting her. "If he only saw me as a subject." She whispered aloud, "What does that make me now? A muse? A model? A moment in his process?" She pressed her palms against her eyes. And what if I meant more? What if I was something real and he just walked away? Her mind reeled, circling through every quiet glance, every unfinished sentence, every silence between them that had felt like something unspoken but understood. But was it? Was any of it real? Or had she imagined the depth because she needed to believe in something again? The sky outside turned pale blue with the first light of dawn. Andrea sat still, wrapped in a blanket, eyes red and heavy but dry. Then she stood. She walked to the wall, unhooked the frame, carefully removed the drawing from behind the glass, and rolled it into a protective tube. She folded the letter and tucked it into her coat pocket. And she packed a bag, because in the end it was not about art. It was not about a name or a signature. It was about her heart. And her heart needed a reason, even if that reason would hurt. Even if the answer was that she had only ever been inspiration, not love. Still, she had to know. The streets of New York buzzed with life, the city lights casting long reflections onto wet pavement. Andrea stood outside the gallery, her heart pounding in her chest, hands clutching the rolled drawing like a lifeline. Through the glass doors, she could see people mingling beneath elegant chandeliers, their voices low, their movements graceful. The sign above the entrance read, "Her Light, a solo exhibition by VIC, Her Light." Andrea took a slow breath, then stepped inside. The space was hushed, reverent. The walls were lined with canvases, large, intimate, breathtaking, and every single one of them was her. Andrea blinked, stunned. There she was, sitting by the window of her living room, bathed in morning light. There she was again, standing in the snow, her coat wrapped tightly around her, eyes looking up as flakes drifted down. Another painting showed her laughing, head tilted back, in an unguarded moment of joy she barely remembered having. Her throat tightened. But it was not just her face in these paintings, it was her emotions, her stillness, her fire, her grief and healing intertwined. Every canvas radiated a part of her she thought no one had ever noticed, and yet he had. As she moved from piece to piece, guests around her whispered. "She's stunning," someone said. "There's so much emotion in these, you feel like you know her." Andrea reached the final painting, tucked in a quiet corner, under a single spotlight. This one was smaller, softer. She took a step closer and gasped. It was her, sleeping. She was curled up in her chair, a blanket around her shoulders, her face illuminated by the flicker of candlelight. Her features were relaxed, peaceful, vulnerable in a way that felt sacred. Andrea's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled up, then spilled freely. She had not even known he had seen her like that. Behind her, the room gradually fell silent. Footsteps approached from the side, and then his voice. "Thank you all for coming tonight." She turned slowly, breath caught. There he was, Vincent, standing beneath the gallery's main light, wearing a dark suit, clean-shaven, composed. But his eyes, they were the same. Tired, deep, quiet, still his. He looked out at the crowd. "I am Vincent Gray." A murmur rippled through the room. He continued, calm and clear. "Some of you may remember me as a painter who disappeared. The press called me the lost genius, the man who walked away from brilliance. But the truth is simpler. I was a man who lost his reason to create. I became consumed by success. I stopped seeing the world as it was. I stopped seeing people." He paused. "Until one night I ended up in a small town, homeless, exhausted, trying to disappear. And a woman, a stranger, let me sleep in her garage. No questions, no judgment." Andrea felt the crowd's gaze shift. She tried to stand still, but emotion trembled through her. Vincent looked directly at her. She did not know my name, she did not ask for anything. She simply gave me warmth, and in that silence I began to see again, to feel, to remember why I ever picked up a pencil in the first place. He gestured to the room. "These paintings are not just portraits. They are pieces of what I saw when I looked at her. Her strength, her stillness, her sadness, her kindness, her light." Silence. Then, slowly, applause. Soft at first, then rising, rippling through the gallery like a wave. Andrea stood frozen, tears slipping silently down her cheeks as strangers clapped for a love they did not fully understand, but somehow deeply felt. Vincent stepped down, walking toward her, the applause fading behind him. But Andrea did not move. She could not. Not yet. Andrea stepped out of the gallery into the cold night, the noise and light still echoing behind her like a dream. Snow was falling again, soft, quiet, endless. The city lights blurred through the flakes, making everything feel unreal. She walked slowly, the drawing tube pressed against her chest, her breath uneven. She did not know what to feel. Inside, she had just witnessed her life displayed on canvas, her face, her quiet moments, her pain, her joy, all turned into art, into beauty, into meaning. It was overwhelming, moving, terrifying. She had loved him. She still did. But a part of her still wondered, had he loved her back, or just what she had symbolized? Was she truly the woman he saw, or merely a vessel that brought his muse to life? She turned down a quiet side street, away from the traffic and the gallery-goers still mingling. The snow was deeper here, crunching under her boots. The wind caught her scarf and tangled her hair. "Andrea." She froze. The voice rang out, familiar and raw, cutting through the cold. She turned, and there he was, Vincent, running through the snow without a coat, his breath coming in clouds, his dark hair already dusted white. He slowed as he reached her, stopping just a few feet away, uncertain but unwavering. "I did not want you to leave like that," he said softly, not without hearing what I should have said long ago. She didn't speak, just looked at him, every emotion churning beneath her stillness. He stepped closer, carefully, like approaching a wounded bird. That garage. It was more than a place to sleep. It was the only space where I was not Vincent Gray, not the prodigy, not the disappointment. I was just a man, cold, lost. And then you opened a door. His voice cracked slightly. "You didn't just let me stay in your garage. You let me stay in your world. You listened. You saw me. Before I could see myself again." Andrea swallowed, but her voice came out steady. "And you saw me. More than anyone ever has." He nodded. "But I left without saying goodbye. I was afraid, not of you, but of what I felt, of what I was beginning to want. I thought if I stayed, I would ruin it." "Ruin you?" Her eyes shimmered with tears. "You already broke something." "I know," he whispered, "and I am so sorry." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, flat package wrapped in brown paper. "Before I left, I drew this. I wasn't going to show you. I didn't think I deserved to. But now, I want you to have it." She took it, her hands trembling as she unwrapped the layers carefully. Inside was a drawing, soft, gentle lines in graphite and watercolor. It was the two of them, standing side by side in front of the garage, the sky behind them painted in warm hues of sunset. Their faces were turned slightly toward each other, smiling, not wide, just enough. A moment of peace, of love. Andrea stared at it, her breath caught in her throat. "It's not perfect," Vincent said quietly, "but it's real, like us." She looked up at him. "I don't want you to be a muse," he said. "I don't want you to be an idea. I want you to be my reality. If you'll have me, if we can start again, not as strangers, not as shadows, but as us." Andrea stepped forward. She did not say anything. She just wrapped her arms around him, and he held her. The snow fell heavier around them, muffling the world, wrapping them in a cocoon of silence and softness. Their embrace was long, still, and full. Two people who had been broken and remade, finding in each other a kind of peace they never thought they deserved. Later they would walk together, hand in hand, back toward the lights, toward whatever would come next. But in that moment, under the street lamp, beneath the falling snow, nothing else mattered. The garage in Vermont, quiet, old, simple, would always be there, but now it would no longer be just a memory of shelter. It would be the place where healing began, where hearts opened, where love returned, where a new chapter started. Thank you for joining us for this soul-stirring journey. If Andrea and Vincent's story touched your heart, if it reminded you that love can heal, that kindness can spark transformation, and that even a garage can become a sanctuary, then this is the kind of story we were meant to share with you. We believe in the quiet power of compassion, in moments that restore faith, and in stories that speak to the deepest corners of the human spirit. If you felt something today, don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more heartwarming tales that will stay with you long after the final word. Because sometimes one story can change everything.